Okay. Um, the big thing we have to talk about this evening is our reopening plan. I've been sending you some information. We've been having a group as discussion as individuals about what we think is best for reopening and trying to take into consideration the ever-changing landscape from orders to mandates. And one thing I will point out for the committee, if you notice that over the past couple of days, things have gone from recommendations to mandates, and I continuously expect that to change as we go on. And my point is a couple things. One, we have to make a decision relatively soon, and I'm going to push for that tonight to make sure we're on the same page, and then we can vote and ratify that officially tomorrow. Our families need to know, they need to have consistency and an idea of what we're doing, and we need to provide it to them the best of our ability. And we need to surrender the fact that it all can change the way things have changed already. So we want to move forward on that. And two, we have to be responsive to the conditions that, like I said, are ever changing. On August 13th, we got information about the measures and metrics they would use to close down a school, as well as today, we got an email at 2:20 about face requirements. So as we build a plan, I think it's important to let the public and everyone else know that it's so fluid because the conditions in which we're working in are changing. And we want to be mindful of that because this team of teachers and principals have put a great deal, as if you have, in building some sort of framework. So again, we have something to present tonight based on what we think is based on your focus, which is live instruction in a safe manner, aligned with the state's expectations and recommendations. And during tonight, we need to discuss the framework, but we also need to discuss the duration of this plan because we're going to need consistencies for families as well as for ourselves as we try to implement this plan that is sure to change. What we're going to do is I'll go over the framework. I'll print it on the screen. I realize some people may not be able to see it, but we can still discuss it. And then what we could do afterwards, we could send a copy of that to the media. And then once the board officially ratifies it, we'll send a copy to our families because they need to know as well. So we'll talk about the framework. We'll talk about the duration. We'll talk about the focus, how the plan was developed. And then what we'll do is we'll do a report out by building. We had some town halls, and I feel bad for all of our parents because when we set up the town hall, we had a vision and a thought in mind. Then recommendations came down and changed some of the focus of that. So I'm sure they have some questions, but I'll do a brief report out by building. And what the board and the community is going to have to understand is not only is this ever changing, some of the conditions in which you're working in may also change as far as staffing, whatnot, et cetera. And we're trying to muddle our way through that to the best of our ability. Then we'll go through an ideal and synchronous feature update. We'll talk about our PPE and associated costs, and then some of the requirements presented by the Department of Education. So with this,
Mike,
yes,
Mike, this is Walter. I just want to emphasize and double, triple, quadruple emphasize that the changes we're considering here are being driven by what's coming out of Harrisburg and not some inconsistency on this board. The board has been, I think, very clear that we want to try to get this district open and get our kids back in their seats. But the complications have been coming from as you pointed out, in the last less than the last week. But I want to make that very clear that we're simply responding to what Harrisburg is telling us they need to have happen.
and Mr. President, I think it's a great point of clarification, and I appreciate you bringing that up so everyone's aware, as it's constantly changing. But I think it's well said, sir. So what I'm pulling up now is a one-page document, and there's a lot of work that goes into it. We know that, and but it falls in line with our previous work. But what we tried to do here is present a one-page document about what it looks like at each level, and a couple things we want to go over. So what we have for your discussion, review, and consideration tonight is a plan that would bring in our pre-K students through grade 5 days a week with social distancing in the classroom. Now, I will have to update this, sir, because what's going to happen there is the mask mandate now should be included somewhere in this communication. Then through 6 through 12, we're going to talk about doing a hybrid model and with the Monday and Tuesday grouping A through L, and then Thursday and Friday grouping M through Z. And we'll talk about 6th grade. We may have a possibility to bring 6th grade in full time, and we'll discuss that and see if the board wants to modify this this option as they see fit. We're also then going to work with our at-risk population. Students with special needs can attend up to 5 days. We'll make sure social distancing is in the classroom, and we'll make sure there's computer access for those who need it. We're also going to talk about the health hybrids, and that may change as a result of the governor's mandate, and we'll have a discussion led by Rob on that. We're also still going to provide our remote learning opportunities that are both asynchronous and synchronous, and then we're still going to provide lunch that meets the social distancing guidelines, but also reach out to the community and provide breakfast and lunch on those days that they're remote, because we understand the importance of meeting these kids' needs, and that's what we want to do. Transportation, we're going to strongly encourage parents to transport their child to school when possible, and busing will be available, but again, understand masks will be required. So what we're going to do is let you time to digest this. We're going to go through by building, talk about the different pieces, but what we're going to have to do and decide as a group, as a committee, is to be, if the committee's okay with us saying to the parents, you had a chance to review the options, you had a chance to submit your choices, and what we should do is hold that steady for the first 9 weeks. And then where we can have some wiggle room or flexibility, we'll absolutely give that, but we can't do it for everyone because it would have an impact on our social distancing guidelines. So here's our thought. Families had enough time to review it. They've been nothing but great and flexible as things have changed so much. But the plan that you see in front of you would stay steadfast through November 6th. That would be the first 9 weeks. And that's what you see happening across a lot of the school districts. That way it gives families and our staff to follow in line. So if you ask me what this plan does, it aligns to the governor's recommendations with social distancing. We're now going to require the mask as we're required to, but it also meets your vision of what can we do to get the people, the students in there, our youngest at-risk population, in as much as we can and still adhere to those guidelines. We didn't make those guidelines. The guidelines came from, again, from the governor's office, but you'll notice they've been changing, right? Before is do social distancing to the best of your ability. Now it's strongly recommended. Same thing with masks. Masks were strongly recommended. Now they're required. So things are changing. So it may be a more conservative approach, but we did that as we think this is still going to continuously change up to September 8th. Again, the big wiggle room we have here is we could modify 6th grade, and we'll discuss that when it gets time to junior high, about what that looks like for them coming up to 4 days a week. And I know that may not make sense, but we were working on it till just right before this meeting. So we'll report out about that. But that is, the high level overview that we're looking at. And again, we're going to send it out once we have some time for the committee to deliberate, once the board takes official action. But we did want to show the public what are some of our options we're looking at the current time. And I think that I'm hopeful that one pager does that. Now, again, we know it's not perfect, but we know we feel it's equitable and responsive to our family needs. The one thing we heard overwhelmingly is let's get our youngest learners back in, or at-risk learners back in. And this plan does that. Is it perfect? It's absolutely not. But this is not an ideal situation in which we're working on across the Commonwealth. And combine that with the fluidity in which it's changing, it's very difficult. But I think everyone did a nice job trying to meet that moment to the best of their ability. Again, I surrender it has flaws. I surrender it will upset some folks, and I get that. But it wasn't done to hurt anyone. It wasn't done to be inconsiderate of their needs. It's just us trying to do the best we can while adhering to guidelines that are constantly in flux. So that's the overall framework. We talked about the duration. Again, what we're recommending is that when the families voted, we hold that in to the first 9 weeks. But again, if someone's in school and they want to go ideal, we can do that. The problem is if they want to go back to regular school full days a week, that can have an impact on our social distancing. So we're going to address that by a case-by-case basis. But what it does do, it gives us it allows us to give some live instruction with this in a safe manner, aligned with the state's expectations and recommendations. And we'll go over them in a minute. But that's where we are coming at based on your input to us as an administration team and based on the guidance from PDE and Department of Health. And it's incredibly frustrating for our parents. It's incredibly frustrating for us to change as much as we have. But again, I have to meet the moment and surrender to the guidelines and expectations we're provided. I know everyone's going through a lot, especially at the state level, but I wish those guidance and recommendations would have came in June. That would have directly impacted how we are planning things moving forward. The fact that they're coming on August 17th, it's hard, but we have to be responsive as they come in. So that's an overview. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Heinrich and Mr. Zahorchak to see if they have any input. And then what we're going to do, Mr. Harley, is we'll go through building by building, because the principals spend an incredible amount of time looking at their spreadsheets, making sure we can meet social distancing, working with families on one-to-one basis. And one thing I'll add before I turn over to Mr. Heinrich and the principals is any parents who have a question about their options at their building level should be directed to the building level principals, because they're handling that on a case-by-case basis. And we want to make sure that that personal touch, that personal response is in there. And so we could do the best we can, because each need may be that unique and that individual, but we're doing the best we can with the guidelines that we're given. So Mr. Heinrich, I'll turn it over to you, followed by Mr. Zohorchak, and then we'll do a building report out.
The only thing I would add to what you said was that despite the numerous changes that the state keeps throwing at us, it seems like every time we have a plan, they change the equation on us a little bit. We have still been able to put together a plan that does address our youngest learners, our most at-risk learners, our learners with the highest needs, and meet the requests from our families to provide those opportunities for their problems with childcare by bringing the youngest learners back, and address all of the safety recommendations and guidelines and mandates that the state has thrown at us. So despite all the changes we were required to make, we have been able to still provide our families choice, provide our families support, and be responsive to their needs, which is really what we wanted to do in the first place. So although I'm exhausted and a little bit frustrated by what the state has done, I think we're in a good spot as far as all things considered, still having a pretty decent plan for our children. Justin?
Rob, Mike, I agree completely with both of you, and I would say from the standpoint of a special education director, that getting students with disabilities in as much as we possibly can is a priority of the district. And right now, our plan is for students in grades K to 6 to get students with disabilities back in full, and with that in mind, they would be there 5 days a week. And then any grade levels that are doing hybrid approach, to be able to get our most high need population with our life skills classroom and our autistic support classrooms in there at least 4 days per week, and then learning support and emotional support following the hybrid schedule with opportunities virtually for students to be taught in specifically with their IEP goals in mind. I think that's definitely a priority, and to get our highest need learners in there is a priority of ours for sure. Thanks.
Thanks, Mr. Heinrich and Mr. Zohorchak. The next thing I'd like to do then is we'll go in the order it's identified on the agenda. Start with Ben Franklin and working our way down. And the building principals are going to give you some insight and overview to how they accomplish social distancing and why they need to make sure parents are locked into that first 9 weeks, how that plays a role in our social distancing and class size. And then we're going to turn over to Ike and Horace Mann, and they're going to talk to you about what we have possibly looking at as far as hiring temporary professional staff to meet the guidelines for social distancing at the 4 or 5 level. And I have to be honest, there is a cost, and we're working with the association to figure that out and see what that looks like to make sure that's something to become a reality. But we're not going to lie, there is a cost associated with that. So it's something we want to vet out. And what we also have to understand, if the board chooses this direction, when the pandemic closes, our ability to sustain that cost would be greatly impacted, meaning when the pandemic closes, we may have to do class changes once again to make sure we're back within our budget and make sure we're back within manageable class sizes, not the social distancing guidelines that are required by recommended by the state. Now, the question is, how long is the pandemic going to last? And we don't know that. So that's why we're trying to build a plan that's flexible and responsive to your needs. But families need to understand that once the pandemic ends, that there would be additional changes where we reorganize and those temporary staff would not be needed. And I just want to be direct and honest upon that, because it is a short-term solution. And I know that may cause frustrations for families, and we don't want to deprive them or be deceitful to them. And we want to be upfront and honest. And we're doing the best we can if the goal is to get them back in with the social distancing guidelines in place. So with that,
Mike, if I may, I'd like to point out that the only thing we could do that would be permanent would be to go completely remote, and not allow anybody in the buildings and do it that way. Anything we do has to have flexibility built into it. That when things change for the better or the worse, we will have to respond as a district. I think it's incredibly important to get these younger learners back into the buildings in front of teachers. And the main thing that's changed in the last week is we've gone from social distancing being recommended to being a requirement and the face mask from being recommended to being a requirement. So this, what you're proposing here, is in reaction to having hard and fast rules now, and basically no flexibility in the district.
That's correct, sir. And let me just point out that came on August 17th at 2:20 p.m.
That's pretty recently, isn't it?
So it is a living plan, and what I fear the most is what happens from now until the start of school. And I don't know, sir, and I can't predict that, but we'll surrender to it. We'll meet the moment to the best we can, but it can change. And if the past several months is any indication, it will change. So that gives you a good overview. It gives you an idea. Let's report out by buildings now. I'll turn it over to Ms. Urbani, and she can do a brief overview. Then we'll go through Dawn, then Ms. Eisenman, and so forth and so forth. Ms. Urbani?
And if there's anything that I omit, please ask me to include it, Mr. Vukovic. I do want to say I very much appreciate the fact that the board recognizes the importance of us getting our littlest learners back in the building. It's going to be very difficult for us to do an awful lot of learning without the face-to-face. With that being said, I do understand that parents that have chosen the at-home options that we have, we will do our best to meet their needs. But thank you for recognizing the fact that it's important we get our learners back in. At this point in time, I've measured every room in the building, anywhere from 2 to 3 times. It was built in 1953. So what we are finding is that we don't have a lot of consistency in the classrooms and the amount of space that can accommodate the 6 feet of social distancing. So my classrooms can hold anywhere from 14 to 16 students with 6 feet of social distancing. So that means I'm probably going to have to make some slight adjustments to class lists as we get closer to the start of the school year. We have anywhere from 12 to 16 students in a classroom right now. As far as VPA or recess goes, we will have 2 classes outside at a time to help with the social distancing. In the cafeteria, I was able to bring desks in, and they are spaced 6 feet apart, again, to accommodate the social distancing requirements. I've shared a lot of information with our families about what it's going to look like, in the actual classrooms themselves. If there's anything that I can reiterate, I'm happy to do that. And I'm sorry, Mr. Schroth, do I have what now?
No, there was a comment in the chat room about somebody not having any sound.
Oh,
And I was simply responding to see
Okay.
if they had it now.
Okay. Currently, with the amount of staff that we have, we're going to be okay with social distancing and meeting the requirements. If at any time our class sizes go beyond what we can hold in the classroom, then we will look to repurpose some staff members. That may happen. I have a couple of grade levels that are just kind of teetering right on the edge of needing to add another teacher. Do you have any questions for me?
Kelly, this is Walter.
Hi.
Both you and Dawn, with this new mandate on the mask, my concern is whether or not the kindergarten and first graders, especially those that are kind of new to school, you've got a real difficult task, I think, in being consistent, getting them to wear it. Have you and Dawn given any thought as to how I realize that just came out here at 2:00, but have you given any thought as to how to strategize that for the while they're actually in the classroom setting?
Well, like you said, this is just a couple hours that we have to process this. I will tell you, I visited some of the daycares and preschools in the community about 2 weeks ago, just to kind of see how things are going there. 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds were doing an excellent job keeping masks on. And the teachers all really praised the children and said, it was us, the teachers, and that were more the problem and more the concern. The kids were doing a beautiful job. They were keeping their masks on. So that gave me a lot of hope that I think our kindergartners and first graders may be able to handle it. We've talked about it as a staff. I really want our teachers to be responsive to students and their needs. If it looks like children need a break, we're going to take a break. We're going to deliver learning in smaller chunks than maybe we have in years past. And that way, we can take those breaks as necessary. We have, Dawn and I are spacing out areas in the hallway where students can step out into the hallway and take a break if necessary. They'll go outside for mask breaks. It's going to be rough in the beginning with the summer coming to a close, and it's going to be a little bit hot, but I think that we're just going to have to get through it as best we can.
Yeah, and I think the key is just
Thank you.
being flexible. Yeah, sorry, Walter. I just think the key is being flexible. Just meeting the needs of the students where we need to. We have to add more mask breaks. We'll add more mask breaks. If the mask breaks we have in the schedule aren't in the right time frame, or they're too late or too early, we'll just make adjustments. And that's pretty much what all staff kind of realize and have in their heads, is just kind of moving on the fly. And the announcement of 2:30 is just one more example of having us shift on the go here.
And Ralph, any thought on outdoor learning at the buildings? Yes, we are going to encourage teachers to take children outside for a story. When you're walking around, you can always count various objects, anything that can tie into a math lesson. We're definitely going to encourage some learning to take place when we are outdoors. Absolutely. That's a great question.
So, Mr. Springer, I'll turn the floor over to you and see how you want to address it moving forward. And we'll see if there's any questions, then we'll move on. Sir?
Thank you.
Okay. So at East Pike, we can hold 18 students a classroom. That's with 6 feet apart. All classrooms are currently set up 6 feet apart. Teachers are starting to come in to get themselves organized and ready to go for the school year. We are still in the process of contacting families, and I want to thank Mrs. Lychak, who's been reaching out to all the families just to indicate that if they're choosing the synchronous, the asynchronous, or the health hybrid, or if they're coming back to us traditionally. I'm just trying to get an accurate number. We know that number is going to be fluid, and we'll adjust as we can. But as of now, every classroom at East Pike is under that 18 mark. We may have to add a few rooms at different grade levels to make that happen. But that's what we wanted to make sure, is that we got all of our learners, our young learners, in the building face to face. As great a job as our teachers did last spring, we realized that face to face is the right thing and the best plan. So we're glad we're able to accommodate that. And East Pike is the same as Ben Franklin. We'll take advantage of our outdoor space as well. Some of the teachers are putting up sign-out sheets for the oak trees, which are around East Pike. So they'll be signing those out during the course of the day. So everybody's thinking, I guess, outside the box, so to speak. But at East Pike, we're ready to go, and just waiting on day one to arrive.
Thank you, Mr. Springer. Let's do this one chunk at a time. Any questions for K-3 from the committee before I turn over to the intermediate buildings? Mr. Harley, is there any questions from you, sir?
Trying to find my button. If I understand this right, then that the K-3 buildings would remain K-3? Would any of those classes have to move to a different building?
No, those will all be held in our current buildings.
And how are you able to do that?
What we're doing, sir, is we're repurposing staff. We're changing staffing assignments to make sure we can fall in the guidance with the social distancing guidelines, sir.
Okay, so you're taking reading specialists and making them classroom teachers or whatever. What are you doing about the number of rooms?
Mr. Harley, at this point in time, we have a significant amount of students that have chosen either ideal or synchronous learning. For instance, I typically have a school that houses about 460 to 470 students. Right now, I'm at about 330.
Okay, so the students that are opting for different methods of education are making it so we don't have to move classes from your buildings to another building.
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's great. That's good. That's good to know. Any questions from the committee? Walter, do you have anything? Board?
Just to follow up with Dawn on that same question, are you seeing similar registration numbers, Dawn?
Yeah, the first thing is our kindergarten numbers are lower than normal. So that's the first thing. So I needed only 4 kindergarten classrooms this year where I typically would have 5. So that's a room savings there. And then I have about 67 kids across the building that have chosen an option other than the traditional. So just using the available spaces, shuffling some people around, being a little creative. Mr. Banny and I have been able to keep all the K-3 staff in their current buildings using the current spaces that we have.
Okay. All right, Mr. Harley. We're going to move on to Ike and Horace Mann. And this one is where it gets difficult because of class size averages. And this is the one where we came forward and said, look, there's a cost if you want to keep the students in your building. We did vet out looking at using the junior high and senior high as options for, 4th and 5th grade. But if you do that, that has a dual an impact on what we do at the junior and senior high for those kids. So the question is, if you're trying to get kids back in as much as possible, then you have to take that in consideration as we look through those options. So we did look at moving 4th and 5th grade up to the junior high and senior high because they have bigger classrooms that requires to meet the social distancing guidelines. But we knew if we did that, then that would automatically, in our opinion, put 6 through 12 on remote learning. So if you say, well, why did you abandon that idea? We brought it to your consideration, but we're thinking that if you want to get everyone some days in the building, and then the option of hiring temporary staff may be the best route to go. But there is a cost associated with that. So before I go any further, we talked about the cost, and I know that's going to be a point that we continue to need to discuss. Let me turn it over to Ms. Eisenman. She created a whole new schedule with Krista to help address for this change and what that would look like in additional classrooms. And we're doing the best we can to make that work. So I'd like Aaron to have a chance to not only report out on what the overall framework looks like as far as, classroom size and our social distancing guidelines and mask breaks, but also what the schedule may look like, because you'll see a tweak and some changes that we're doing that we think can help us through this as far as meeting these requirements. Ms. Eisenman?
Thank you very much, and thank you to everyone. First, I want to say I couldn't have done this without my partner, Krista Savagian. She and I have worked very closely on this. We have worked very hard on this, and this is a joint endeavor for both buildings for 4 or 5. Currently, our 4 or 5 class sizes average between 23 and 26, depending on the room in the building and the number of students. In order to get class sizes down to where we can fit, both buildings can fit approximately 17 students in a room, socially distanced at 6 feet. So in order to get those class sizes down to the 17 number, we would need to hire an additional 8 people to cover those classrooms. Now, once we had the 8 teachers in place, there is a space consideration at Eisenhower. We are almost at capacity. I could only add 3 additional classrooms. So one of the classrooms would have to move to Horace Mann as far as that would go. Now, that sounds like, oh, we're moving a whole classroom of students. But in actuality, last year, due to class sizes at Horace Mann, any new enrollee at Horace Mann that was in 4th grade was enrolled at Eisenhower because of the space issues. Those 8 to 10 students would return to Horace Mann, and that would be those kids that would be moved, and then they would stay at Horace Mann even after the pandemic would blow, because they could be reassigned amongst the teachers that Mrs. Savagian would have at that time. So there would be some students that would be leaving Eisenhower to go to Horace Mann, but those were students that we had originally moved to Eisenhower that are Horace Mann students in attendance area space. So that's the first chunk of kind of this. And then the next chunk is that we would have students in all options. Currently, I have 51 students that want some either synchronous learning or hybrid or ideal. So those students would be assigned to those things. And when we would end up with approximately 6 fourth grade teachers and 6 fifth grade teachers at Eisenhower, and 6 fourth grade teachers and 7 fifth grade teachers at Horace Mann. Now, in order to be able to accommodate that on a schedule, we have to make some tweaks. Currently, we do a 5-day rotation with specials. We would have to change that to a 6-day rotation. And what we would do is we would repurpose our music. We would still have our general music course. And what we would do is then for the second special that we would have to add, we would have a music class that would be based on more of the choral virtual chorus. So the students wouldn't lose the chorus continually. And we could staff that because both buildings do have a music teacher. So we would just share our music teachers like we do our other specials so that we could cover that second special of music. Our life skills students in Eisenhower would continue to come in 5 days a week, and we would be able to socially distance and work with those students in that area. I think that is all the pertinent details. Do you have any questions so far? Oh, the other thing is we would have to move to a 3 lunch schedule. So we would have lunches 3 times, 2 classes per grade each time. And we would be using the outdoor spaces for all kinds of things. And I actually had I was talking with a teacher, and we had an idea that maybe if we got some of those tent canopies, we could set them up around the playground for areas of, so the kids could go outside more and have some shade. But I have not vetted that through yet. That was just like a 3 o'clock idea.
Thanks, Ms. Eisenman. And we have Rob and Greg in the call. We could talk about the prices of other tents we looked at, but there's nothing off the table. And we'll make sure we bring that up too. So nice job. I think Mr. Harley may have disconnected. If not, Mr.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm back, Mike.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
All right.
Every once in a while I get thrown out. So
Mr. Harley, if you're okay with it, I'd like to turn over to Ms. Savagian, unless you have any questions for Ms. Eisenman, but I'd like to wait till Ms. Savagian presents so we can attack it as a group from 4 to 5.
please.
Okay, Ms. Savagian?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thanks for coming on the call today. I know we have a lot of Horace Mann community members, but a lot of community members in general, so thank you for being here. Mr. Vukovic, you can pause me at any time, but I kind of saw this in 3 directions. And if we're just talking about hiring the teachers for the temporary positions, which would mean that our students would be able to socially distance at 6 feet and also be able to continue to learn in school and at Horace Mann and Eisenhower, Horace Mann would be getting 5 of those teachers. 3 teachers would be added to the 5th grade team, which would reduce our class sizes to about 15.5, which would mean we can't put a half of a student in a class, so it'd be 16 roughly per classroom at 6 feet distancing, and we would stay on Horace Mann grounds, just to clear that up. The other piece would be 4th grade would go from 4 teachers, which would have given us about 24 students per class at that time, to 25, to now about 6. Which would bring us to like 14.5 or 15 students per class with our current numbers. Now, Mrs. Obarto, our school counselor, has currently called most families. We're waiting on about 20 calls back. So we are increasing our awareness of how many families are looking to do asynchronous model versus synchronous model. And some have switched their vote a little bit since the start. And we understand that. That's why we have flexibility as one of the core pieces that we're working with. But with that, we just wanted you to be aware that we would have a total of a total of 7 teachers in 5th grade and 6 teachers in 4th grade, with one exception that 5th grade was already heading toward higher class sizes. And one of those teachers would be staying for the duration of the year to just keep the class sizes down, because our anticipation is always toward the positive, that we'll be coming back to green and being together again. So that is the vision there. And Mr. Vukovic, would you like me to talk to the hybrid models if it's 2 days on, 2 days off still? Okay.
Yeah,
So
please go.
as you've, yes, sir?
Yeah, please. Yep, go ahead, please.
So this is nothing new to you if you've been reading the plan. So we still have the option on the table. And I know after today, it's just really gathering your facts as community members and deciding what's best for your family. And also, I believe the vote goes out tomorrow. So that's why we want to give you everything. So I saw it as like a plan B, like another plan, that there's a hybrid model where there's 2 days in as one cohort. Wednesday is off for everyone at distance learning time. And then the second cohort, which would be, let's say, cohort B for this sake, would come in like a Thursday, Friday model. So there's still that on the table as a form of hybrid. And remember, hybrid's really just the opportunity to get kids 6 feet apart. So that can look like any way. So you've now heard of 2 ways. So one would be increasing teachers and reducing class sizes. The second way would be the 2 days on, kind of like 3 days off, if you think about it like that, but you're still on. It's just from distance learning approach. And then the third opportunity for you would be the third opportunity for hybrid, which Mr. Vukovic spoke about earlier, which also depends on grades going fully online in order to do that. And that would be that Eisenhower and Horace Mann would move to a larger facility to be able to spread out further for that 6-foot distancing, which in the junior high, if you could picture, there's double classrooms and 24 students could spread out in a double classroom. And that was obviously spoken about before this, but we just wanted you to see that there were 3 pretty much containers that we were looking within, and we wanted to share the findings with you. And Aaron shared the schedule with what your child would be going through if we chose option, which was the first one, and that is with the increased number of teachers. One more thing is that if you're going into like more of a hybrid model, mentioning like 2 days on, 3 days off, and you were in 2 cohorts, we'd be running a similar schedule as we did before. It's just that we're running it with less students at a time. And then finally, if we go to the junior high, let's say, as an increased area to work, and that would also mean lots of other decisions would have to be made with that, because there's a whole group of awesome students that are there. So we'd have to figure that out. That's why nothing's decided tonight. But that also comes with a schedule as well. So thank you, family members, for calling the schools. And we plan to have out the information to you after the voting process tomorrow. So we're just waiting for that so that there's not any confusion. Any other questions from the board or Mr. Vukovic, or anything you'd like to clarify at this time? I'm watching the chat too.
Krista, great job overall presenting the idea. I know the board may have questions. And again, if I could just summarize, the first plan was to bring kids back at the 4 or 5 level. With hiring the temporary staff, so we're able to meet the social distancing guidelines and still allow 6th grade to come in, as they'll explain about, as well as then the hybrid model for grades 7 through 12.
Mike, to clarify, the way it's, if we keep 4 and 5 at 5 days, the reduced number of children mean that Eisenhower and Horace Mann do not have to relocate classes? They can put in their buildings?
Yes, sir. If you bring in, if the board makes a decision to hire the additional staffing, the temporary staffing, then yes, we can house everyone in our building. So if you said, look, Mike, let's go ahead with the 8 temporary staff members, we could house all those extra classrooms in our current buildings. That is correct. Aaron and Krista, if you give me a thumbs up to make sure I'm speaking correctly.
Yes, and just to clarify, Mr. Harley, just we're not making location there, but it was just be about a group of students. So roughly 45 students in 5th grade, for example, will go into one of those new teachers' classrooms. And then whenever we go back into, I guess, normal phase or the green phase, those students would come back into the core teachers' classroom. So like a Mrs. Duffy, who's full-time on staff. Does that make sense, Mr. Harley?
I think it makes sense, but I think, Krista, we can focus on trying to get open now and worry about when we cure the virus and moving back to normal, that we can keep that confusion out of the conversation.
The only clarification I'd like to make, Mr. Harley, I'm sorry, is that in the current model with the long-term subs, the students that had been assigned to Eisenhower that live in the Horace Mann area last year, that were ones that came like during the year and stuff, they would go back to Horseman. So those students would no longer be an Eisenhower student, they'd be a Horseman student. And that's approximately 8 to 10 students.
Okay, but we're not moving kids to a off-site position. We're not taking anybody to the junior high school at this point.
That's
correct.
correct.
What the board dictates.
Any comments from the committee or the board? Okay, I think we can move on, Mike.
Okay, the one thing I want to address before I turn over to junior high is there probably is a normal question. Hey, where are you going to find these teachers? Are they certified? Yes, they're certified. And what happened was Aaron and Krista did an amazing job calling everyone to see who may be interested in these positions. So we're upfront with them that they're temporary, but it allows them to gain valuable experience. It allows us to improve our sub pool, and it allows us to continue, if the board so chooses, to operate K-5. So there are certified teachers, and we're going to have training that we're going to need to update them on, prepare them with, and we just have to meet that moment. But I know Kristen and Aaron did a nice job looking through, screening people who would be a good fit and helping us meet this moment. So with that said, I'd like to turn over to Dr. Minnick. Dr. Minnick and Mr. Edmondson are going to talk about what it looks like from 6 through 8. In particular, they've been doing a great job trying to figure out how to get 6th grade in, and it may not be ideal, meaning 5 days a week, but I think they do have some solutions and some options for the board to consider. So with that said, I'll turn it over to Dr. Minnick.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovic. Good evening, everybody. Thank you to all the community members who are in attendance tonight. Thank you to our faculty and staff who have taken great interest in helping plan for the upcoming school year. We've been charged with the task of coming up with a model that's unique in that there's a value placed on maximizing the number of days that we can have the 6th grade class in a face-to-face setting, and in a secondary school where 2 other grade levels would be more of a hybrid, or not a hybrid, but a online synchronous setting. So I'm going to focus on 6th grade, and I'll start by saying that I believe we can bring 6th grade back nearly full time. We ran into a couple of hiccups with things to consider regarding a 5-day week. If we bring them in for a Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday plan, we can run a schedule where we are very confident that we can provide the requirements for social distancing. Part of the strategy behind that is the physical plant. The space at the junior high does afford us a number of classrooms, 7 to be exact, that are that have retractable walls, therefore making the option of having a double-sized classroom available to our 6th grade teachers. While that does not quite accommodate all of the programming of a 6th grade class being in the building, it takes a huge bite out of the spatial requirements that would otherwise limit us. Part of the hiccups that I mentioned, if we have 7th and 8th grade in the building and planning for a potential, whether it be hybrid or synchronous online learning, we had talked about a number of different options that incorporated whether it be a half day at the end of the week or a full day in the middle of the week. Part of the 2 on, 3 off options that have been developed included a day where teachers have an abundance of prep and planning time to not only meet with students and address virtually and address one-to-one questions, but also plan for the various modes of instruction. A question was lingering: if we bring 6th grade back in, how are we going to afford them the same amount of planning and prep if they're running a 5-day week? Because they're going to have the same challenges as our 7th and 8th grade, knowing that some community members may opt for virtual instruction or online instruction rather. So that question was lingering. And there were some logistical challenges on Wednesdays that presented themselves that we felt the better option for all stakeholders was to do face-to-face instruction, a traditional setting for 6th grade, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and then use Wednesday as an off day in the school building for 6th grade, while all 3 grade levels would still have an abbreviated schedule where they have touch points with all their teachers on that particular day. And as you know, we run a 6-day rotation. So whatever day of the rotation of Wednesday turns out to be from week to week, they will have 15-minute periods where they can use that for touch points and just to review understanding of previously taught lessons, or whatever the teacher feels is the best use of that 15 minutes. A majority of the time outside of the 9 periods would be used for teachers to collaborate and plan for the next 4 days of instruction. So for that reason, we felt that it offers parents consistency where they're running on the secondary schedule and thinking out ahead to when we are back into, whether we ease into a hybrid schedule and then a traditional schedule, hopefully sooner than later. It offers parents some consistency Monday through Friday, knowing that every Wednesday is the day where it's in a virtual setting. One contingency, or not a contingency so much, as one of the costs of having 6th grade. Not all of the spaces, as I said, have been identified as double classroom spaces. In our schedule, 6th grade has their encore rotation, 7th and 8th period. So in order to facilitate the encores in the rooms that those are taught, we would have to do a live, like a virtual live instruction from a different classroom setting. So you would have I would have to free up teachers for their encore classes to reduce the class size in the actual setting that a class is happening. For example, if it's BCIT and I cannot fit 30 kids in a BCIT class, I would have to reduce that class to the degree that it fits the restrictions or the mandates for social distancing. So half of those kids would still be at the junior high, but they would be logging into a live session of the BCIT class from another setting with a second teacher that's not a BCIT teacher supervising them. So is that the best case scenario? Obviously not the best case scenario, but yet we would be retaining them in the school, and we would be providing them the live instruction, and the accessibility to the teacher being right down the hall, for example, is better than trying to facilitate that from home 5 days a week for a 6th grader. And I think just for the sake of full disclosure, any of the models that we come up with that are less than a face-to-face instruction, you simply sacrifice a level of the quality of instruction. I think everybody's been pretty forthcoming in admitting that the best case scenario is everybody being back face-to-face, and with the restrictions that we're under, that's not an option for all 3 of our grades. But we believe that we can make it work for 6th grade, knowing that this is a critical year in their growth and development, as well as it being a transition year within our K-12 program. And the 7th and 8th graders, we believe that running the virtual live sessions where teachers are able to collaborate and work together and have that planning on Wednesdays, just as their 6th grade colleagues will have. I'm in the middle of something right now. Sorry. Pardon me. Life is happening. So I'm in the middle of something is what I said. Did you catch that? Just in the middle of something right now. So the truth of the matter is we believe that we have a plan that will make our 6th grade families that want to come back now pretty happy. It's not perfect, but we're really blessed with the physical plant that we have to work within. And we have confidence in the talented teachers that we have on our team. And I'm open for questions now.
So, Mike, this
Dr.
is
Minnick-
Tamara.
Hi, Mrs. Leeper.
All right, go ahead.
Go ahead, Tamara.
So would everybody be learning virtually on their own on Wednesdays, or would there be live virtual classes on Wednesdays?
That's a great question. Yeah, so I'll see if I can frame it a little differently so that if anyone else had that same question, I can clarify. We would run an abbreviated schedule that is synchronous, that is live. It would be abbreviated. We spec'd it out to about to be about 15 minutes per class, with a 5 or 10 minute transition between every class. And what that affords, it with a later start as well. So it was consistent with the high school and the plan that they were devising. And I don't want to steal their thunder. You know, they've been great working with them and trying to develop consistency for our secondary students. But in short, to answer your question, it would be synchronous. It would be live. And kids would check in with their classroom teachers for an abbreviated period of time. And the value in that is just not letting an entire day go by without a touch point with their teacher. It could be just affirming a previous assignment or answering questions or whatnot in that abbreviated time with the intention of reconvening the following day. And then, and again, the value in abbreviating that, the value is in allowing teachers time to collaborate, to prepare and plan for future lessons.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one more. So so A through, if we do the first part of the alphabet goes Monday and Tuesday, and then the second part goes Thursday and Friday, will there be beginning of the alphabet kids receiving the same virtual lesson in the same class as somebody on Thursday and Friday?
Yes.
Okay, so it's still that same model.
I'm sorry, can you reframe that for me, please?
She asked if the students on the off day are going to receive the same virtual learning as the kids that are attending in the classroom. And that's what the synchronous team decided today was, yes, it's basically all the students are attending class. It's just a matter of how they're attending class. Half of them will be physically in the room. The other half will be attending via Google Meet. So they'll be Googling in. But yet there may be some exceptions on like lab weeks for like say biology class. If they are dissecting a frog Monday and Tuesday, those virtual students might be given an asynchronous lesson that week so they can then dissect the frog Thursday, Friday. But most cases in most classes, they'll just be attending the same classroom differently.
Okay,
Rob,
thank you.
Rob, this is Walter. I want to follow up on that before Uda asks her question. So if the classes are being taught sequentially, and assuming that your A group gets their lessons Monday and Tuesday of the first week, and then they get Wednesday synchronous, then the people who are coming in the B group on Thursday, Friday, are they then a week behind on what's taught on Wednesdays so that they're all on the same?
No, the current plan is that those students will all be attending the same lesson, taught at the same time by the same teacher, but some will be joining it via this program that we're joining this meeting. So some of the kids will physically be sitting in the room. Some of the students will be sitting at home joining via Google Meet, but they'll all be receiving the same instruction most of the time. So
okay, thank you.
Will not be behind too often.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, my question has to do with the Wednesday that you talked about. And at one point, I think maybe I'm just confused that Wednesday is always Wednesday. It doesn't become Thursday when we have a holiday on a Monday. You know how some of the schools have like a 5-day rotation, but day one is not always Monday.
Right.
But Wednesday will always be Wednesday, right? It won't.
Yes, ma'am. What we're gonna
that's correct.
We're gonna try to. Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say we run a 6-day schedule at the junior high, which is also unique, and we would just roll the 6 days the way we always have, and regardless of what day that we were on 1 through 6, Wednesday is always Wednesday. we felt that the parents need reliability and consistency with what we're rolling out, and then to do anything different than that would be not only maddening, it would lead to a lot of confusion.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And just so everybody knows, as far as sixth grade having lunch, we already had that plan originally in place for the social distancing. So we're good. We have a plan in place utilizing the library, LGI, gym, and the CAF. We're still good sticking to that 6 feet as far as all the sixth grade as much as possible coming in and having their lunch. I know some of those numbers were a little bit down, but we have a little over 200 sixth graders still signed up for the traditional last time we checked. But we're still good to go as far as social distancing goes, having those kids come 4 days a week with lunch.
So, Mr. Harley, we'll turn over to you or anyone else for final comments or questions before we go on to the junior high. I know it's a lot to process, but I like taking it by level at a time. Mr. Harley or anyone else?
Sure. Anything from the committee or the board? I don't hear anything, Mike. I think we're ready to move on.
Okay.
Thanks, thanks everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Minnick. Thank you, Mr. Edmondson. I'd like to turn the floor over now to Mr. McElhaney and to Mr. Johnson. So please, gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovic, and good evening, everybody. Building on a lot of comments you heard this evening, I want to assure you that the senior high school is ready for any contingency, whether that be a hybrid, synchronous, asynchronous, health hybrid, internet, or fully remote, as well as any students who do not have internet. The way we conduct scheduling here at the senior high school, it allows for a maximum capacity, so we're in very good shape as far as meeting whatever challenge comes forward. Also, just comment on the town hall meeting. I really appreciated everybody who attended that and got a lot of good feedback from that. When we presented information, we did as we were in the green phase. However, much of our green phase operation is similar to our yellow phase. We were always deferring or trying to err on the side of abundance of caution. So aside now, we're in the hybrid. Needed to let you know, Mr. Johnson did an excellent job of going around the school and measuring every single space in which instruction was scheduled to occur. And then Wes Matthews did a fantastic job of coordinating and producing a report that is allowing our counselors to look at those class enrollment totals and make adjustments accordingly. The first run through, we were able to balance our classes in such a way that we are not exceeding those class maximums, and any of those schedule changes that needed to take place were few and very manageable. As far as social distancing goes, we're able to go with the 6 foot and with a new information released today with mask. We're planning on our mask breaks. We have a schedule set up for Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday, as well as our Wednesday. Dr. Minnick covered some of that. Mr. Johnson is on now. I'm going to turn over to him in a moment talk about the scheduling. He's very instrumental in creating that here at the senior high school. We're going on with Mr. Heinrich's suggestion that, that students will be wearing masks when in motion, when they're in the hallways, when you're transitioning between learning places. We have so much signage here at the senior high school that we feel very prepared that our students will know the paths of travel they need to take, as well as the reminders, the support and encouragement that they will receive for operating in the high school. In addition, we're making it a point educating our staff. I know many of them have looked at it already, but we'll be going over our health plans with them, as well as our extracurriculars health plan at the beginning of the school year. And I do need to say that our teachers, albeit you hear people saying teachers have summers off, our teachers have been very helpful and in constant communication this summer with us, helping us to plan and whatever our operation looks like. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, and or rather, let me turn it over to Mr. Johnson, please.
Thanks, Mr. McElhaney. Mr. McElhaney and I, and as well as Mr. Edmondson and Mr. Minnick, had been talking about what we were going to do with schedules and things along those lines. When we decided to go with the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, that seamed up very nicely with what we're already doing. Our students will arrive at the same time. One of the complications that does come with having all of our students or half of our students be in school and half of our students be out of school is attendance becomes a little bit more of a concern. So one of the things that we've done is we've taken our schedule that we had and we allotted time at the end of each period for attendance that's going to include both in and out students who are in school and out of school. So we factored that in. Our Wednesday schedule was a little bit more complex, but it seamed up pretty well on Wednesday in an effort to get our teachers planning time, because after all, they're planning for instruction that includes both live in person and the synchronous model. We have planning time built into the morning, which what that did is it shortened our periods throughout the day. Now, since it's a remote learning opportunity, one of our biggest concerns that we had to seam up with wasn't so much lunches or start times, because that's something that's going to happen when students are home. Is we were really focused on making sure that we were aligned with our ICTC students who will be still leaving and heading to ICTC at the same time. So we kind of backwards mapped from using ICTC to develop our schedule. We included 15 minutes for each class with a 5-minute break in between. And we're still able to include our clubs in our Wednesday schedule, as well as our CCER, which is going to be documenting all of our career readiness. Can't think of the word I'm looking for, but all of the
Artifacts.
Artifact, that's the word I was looking for. Thanks, Mr. Vukovic.
Yes, sir.
One other thing too, and I kind of skipped over it when we were talking about the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday schedule, is that when our students are at home, we recognize that they may be glued to a computer for the entire day. One of the reasons why we added 5 minutes to the end of each period for attendance was that for those students who are at home, that actually, when you take the 4-minute in between classes in conjunction saddled right up next to the 5 minutes at the end of class, what that does is that gives our students at home a 9-minute break, which is enough time to move around, do whatever they need to around the house, and then get back to class. In addition, if we were to have a mass break, that would also provide an opportunity for mass breaks throughout the day. So that's where our schedule's at. And junior high, I know, has mimicked a lot of, we kind of worked hand in hand on developing that.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Mr. McElhenney, at this time, Mr. Harley, we'll take any questions from you that you may have, or the rest of the board, committee members, and we'll see what we can do to address it.
Committee, do you have any comments?
I have one question. So the attendance breaks that Doug just spoke about, is that only on Wednesdays or is that every day?
Good question. I actually bounced back and forth. The time at the end is actually for the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. I had forgotten to mention it when we were going through. The attendance isn't necessarily as big of an issue because there isn't classroom changes between the classes on Wednesday. So that's actually not factored into the periods on Wednesday. I doubled back, so I could see where that would have been confusing.
Okay, so it is, it's just the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday. This is the first I've heard of that, and I really think it's a good idea because I think we're going to have some students that are going to get tired of looking at a computer all day and just the eye strain and things we've heard about in the past. So I think that's a great idea.
Thank you.
Ms. Leeper, I could also add that within student schedule, they do have study hall break. They all have their lunch. So there are also natural breaks built in with the day as well, should help with that.
I have a question for Wade. You mentioned early on in your beginning that we're still going to do masks in motion. I thought the guidance today got rid of that. It's masks all the time, whether you're in the classroom or if you're in motion. So we need to I think, stop using masks in motion.
Yes, they're masked all the time. Building on what we were using, we want the students, to make sure that they have their mask on here at the school. Thank you.
So, Mr. Harley, you've seen an overview of what it looks like by each building. Again, let me just reiterate to the committee and the people on the call, the plan is fragile, just like any other one's plans. We're subject to the discretion of the Department of Health. If there's a confirmed case, we have to follow their guidance. We'll show you a measure and a metric they came up with. But what everyone needs to understand is once we open up, understand that we are going to be subject to the recommendations, discretion, and advice given to us by the Department of Health how to mitigate the spread of this virus. It's not to scare people. It's not to upset people. It's just we have to understand that we are subject to follow them in their guidelines, and we're going to do such because they have the authority to implement that, just like they do at whooping cough or things in the past. So I want to be upfront and over redundant on that one intentionally.
Mike, I understand that, but if the plan is to stay this course for 9 weeks, not to go bouncing back and forth. If Indiana, from some miracle, improves, we're gonna do this for the first 9 weeks. Is that correct?
That's our goal. Yep. And the board can always say after maybe 3 weeks in a row of good numbers, the board can always go back and reconsider. But for the sake of planning, we're recommending 9 weeks because I don't know if it's going to get better, and I don't want to set people up for failure or give people false hopes that may not achieve, sir.
Yeah, I think regardless of what the infection rates become, that the board should move forward with this. The intention of holding this for 9 weeks in place. Let our parents and our families get some consistency in their lives, work this through, deal with it as best we can, but to go back and forth as we're going into the flu season, I think is it just causes more chaos than it's worth.
Okay, understood, sir. If it's okay with you, Mr. Hardy, I'd like to move on to having Mr. Heinrich give a brief update on the work. He has two action teams going on: elementary synchronous team and a secondary synchronous team. And I just want to be redundant intentionally here again. The teachers have done an amazing job giving input, building something in flight to make it work. We heard the need for improvement in this area. They surrendered to that. They're meeting it, and I have no doubt they're putting together something special. So we don't have it all ironed out, but I would like Mr. Heinrich to maybe do a brief overview for what he thinks the committee should be aware of and be advised of at this time, sir.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Just so you know, we met with, I want to say there's 21 teachers at the elementary team that have volunteered their time over the summer, and I really appreciate that. And I believe it's actually up to 26 at the secondary level who have volunteered their time. The principals have been working hard, helping lead those groups, and we've come to the following conclusions. At the elementary level for synchronous learning, it doesn't make any sense to Google kids into the actual classroom that they would normally attend. The attention spans of these children are much shorter. They require much more behavior management and redirection to keep them on task. So what we decided there was to identify and dedicate an individual teacher at each grade level to be the virtual learner or learning instructor. So all the students who signed up for synchronous learning will have a dedicated teacher at each grade level. That teacher will break those grade level students into small, manageable groups and follow a set schedule that will be consistent once it's established, where they will meet with those children and work through the same curriculum that they're working through in the traditional classroom, and follow the same pace, etc., the same assessment schedule, down to as close as we can make it. At the secondary level, that's impossible. Because of the social distancing guidelines and because of the forced move to the hybrid model, there's just no way we can change the schedules around to free up teachers to do that, to be dedicated instructors. So we have no choice except to allow those students to Google in, which is going to work fine with those learners. Google Meets and Google Classroom is nothing new to them. Many of them are versed in it already, as are the teachers. And we believe that by Googling them, we're going to be able to keep the pace going at the secondary level. As I mentioned before, there will be certain classes because of hands-on learning opportunities where they may have to have asynchronous lessons occasionally, coupled with, backed by the hands-on learning activity. But the teachers on the committees were confident that we will be able to execute this plan. Mr. McElhaney put together a small team with Mr. O'Neill, and they tested out the technology. the technology works. Mr. O'Neill is telling us that the computers at the secondary level are already up for an upgrade, and there's no time like the present. If we can afford to purchase some new computers at that, through the CARES fund to upgrade those computers. We've already upgraded the bandwidth. You got the board voted on that before, so the bandwidth will handle it. The computers, really the processing unit and the random access memory required to present a screen with many videos going on. When you join this meeting, you'll see that some people's picture is a little bit fuzzier. Sometimes you have refresh screens. Sometimes people sound like they're underwater. And a lot of that comes from inadequate RAM in the computer. So we're going to hopefully be able to address that problem. We're also looking into buying the teachers at the secondary level the equivalent of what are called AirPods, which are wireless earbuds that the teacher can put in so they can hear the kids on the attending the class via Google without having to sit in front of the computer and stare at them, and so that as the teacher moves throughout the room, the students in the Google Meet will be able to hear the teacher clearly. The also benefit of that is if there's something that happens in the classroom that not everybody needs to be part of, the teacher can take the AirPod out of their ear, the earbud out of their ear, and it will automatically mute the situation. So we believe that will give us the technology that we can run these classes pretty seamlessly. We're going to work a lot with our tech innovators, providing training on strategies to keep students online engaged, and teachers or students Googling in engaged, random ways to call on those students to make sure that they're paying attention. Strategies like the flipped classroom, where the students are doing a lot of the learning beforehand and then presenting in the class, so that they're not always spending time in front of their teacher trying to go over directions and stuff, so that the teacher will maximize the efficiency of the classroom that they have in person, that class time they have in person. So that's where we are as far as the instructional piece is concerned. The numbers are pretty staggering. We have 127 students who have chosen IDEAL, the asynchronous model, K-5 currently, 85 students who will need to be instructed synchronously. K-5, again, those are the students that would get the dedicated teacher who would teach them on a consistent schedule. At the secondary level, the numbers are even higher. There are 43 seniors, 27 juniors, 27 sophomores, 31 freshmen, 27 eighth graders, 34 seventh graders, and 26 sixth graders who have signed up for IDEAL right now. Those numbers aren't unmanageable at the secondary level because we already have teachers' schedules that built to handle those and handle those numbers. At the elementary level, though, we are going to have to reassign some staff and move some pieces around to address the number of IDEAL students at the elementary level. That's where we are, sir. Any questions on that front? And if somebody else, another administrator, can take over the answering the questions in the chat, I would appreciate it if you can. Any questions from the committee? Concerning
How about the board? Are we good to move on? Mike, I don't hear anything, so go ahead.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Heinrich. Thank you, everyone. Next, I want to move on. I want to have Greg Trout report out because I think, part of our plan hinges on keeping everyone safe and having the equipment in to do so. What we're finding is a lot of things are back ordered throughout the country, and we want to have an honest conversation with the committee, let you know where we are at on our PPE, in particular, mask, face shields, hand sanitizer. We had previously discussed about staff wearing, jeans, dressing down, not wearing suits every day, but dressing down a little bit so those kids or those staff, when they get home, they can change their clothes right away and throw them into the wash. It makes sense for us to do that, and I'm appreciative that you are okay with that. But I do think the committee needs to be updated about, can we meet the moment in the area of PPE? Greg and his team did an inventory of what came in thus far, and I think it's important to be transparent about where we're at. So with that said, Mr. Trout, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovic. Yeah, right. Currently, we have 1,800 face masks and shields that are adult size that have arrived. 2,000 of the kids, their child face shields were ordered. They arrived also. 1,000 pediatric disposable face masks have also arrived. 4,000 adult disposable have arrived. 2,000 are on order. We have 24 of a half face shield, I'll call them, and we have 500 of those have been ordered. Now that's ones that would bridge the nose and go to under the chin. That's a little bit different style. We have 500 KN95 masks that were ordered. They've arrived. Today we got a shipment of sanitizer wipes that would be in the classrooms with refills to go with those, and also the product that we will be mixing to make a hand wipe. Similar, I hate to use the word like a Clorox wipe, but just in nature, that's what they would be. These ones are going to have an FDA-approved solution in them, so that unlike like a Lysol wipe where you really need to rinse your hands prior to actually eating or using on a desk or something like that, these ones will have an FDA-approved. Our water fountains, we got a shipment on Thursday, and the rest of them came in today. We're going to start to install those starting tomorrow, hopefully. We are hand sanitizer we have for classrooms. Hand sanitizers, we have stations and pedestals for entrances. Those have, the stations have arrived. We're having difficulty acquiring the chemical that goes in them. It looked like it was actually going to be the opposite, but as they have come in, now they are cautioning me that we may have trouble getting that. If that's the case, instead of students coming off the bus, instead of using those stations, we will have a pump bottle with the sanitizer for disinfecting. So that's something that will also be taking place. Currently, it looks like about where we're at right now.
And Greg, what about, Mr. Trout, what about the water bottle filling stations? Have those come in yet?
Yes, they came in Thursday, and the rest of them came in today, and we're going to start installing those tomorrow.
Okay. So, Mr. Trout, I'm sorry, not Mr. Trout, Mr. Harley, I turn over to committee. As you can see, a lot of our stuff is in. Not all of it is in. I think, Greg, do you feel comfortable saying we have enough supplies, PPE, to start the year, but we're going to have to monitor the situation and see how things take a turn either way to see when that product comes in? Is that fair enough?
Yeah, that is correct. The chain of supplies has been changing daily. Something that they thought they would not have difficulty getting has now created stumbling blocks for a lot of suppliers. We use typically, I'd say, 4 different suppliers for a lot of our custodial and PPEs that were some of the PPEs, and not, I mean, we have additional ones that we're using for the face mask and shields, ones we've never really used before. But we have those supplies coming in. They are hoping that things start to loosen up when school gets back in. But there again, they are having a lot of difficulty in getting, especially anything that does contain the alcohol for the instant hand sanitizer. With the way it's regulated, it is taking a little bit longer for them. They're only, according to some companies I've talked to, they claim that they're only allowed to have so much at a particular time, and they have still been having some difficulties in acquiring what they do need to make the products. They are still shipping out. We're hoping to be able to replenish as we are using. If we can't get from one supplier, I've already had discussions with some other ones, and even with the hand sanitizers. There's one company I've already, a couple of weeks ago, I placed a separate order and told them, just in case my other doesn't come in, I would like to, put you on notice that I'm looking for this product. And they are fine with that, simply because even if for some reason, supply chain changes, we're able to get everything we want as far as the disinfectant for the hand sanitizers, they will have no problem getting rid of it. So even if we did order an extra 25 or 50 cases, they said that would not be a problem. So we already have extra ordered, hoping that, quite honestly, hoping everything comes in at the same time, which would be ideal, of course. We also have another 1,000 of a washable face mask that we have ordered, and I look for that to actually be able to be filled within a week.
Okay. Mr. Harley, I'll turn it over to you and the committee, sir, for any other clarifying questions, comments.
I have a question.
Go ahead, Barb.
In the main offices, the secretary's office, and the cafeterias, will we be putting up any plexiglass, or will we be encouraging those staff to wear the face shields at all times?
I'm glad you brought that up. We have surveyed, and that's the one thing I forgot to hit upon was the safety glass is, well, it's a Lexine. It has been ordered for the cafeteria areas and the any secretaries or other people that have asked for it. We do have that. We have that also to install before the start of school. And as some might even ask, not only do they have the plexiglass, but they possibly have the face shield. So we do have that, those supplies also.
And Greg, explain to the committee our idea about requiring the glasses now, because we found that may be useful to help in mitigating the spread, and we were ordering safety glasses as well. Do you want to speak to that, or side shields? Do you want to explain that, Greg?
Yes, for some people that may not be feeling impeded with having a face shield on, we're looking at side shields that fit right over top of your side glass frame if you are already a glasses wearer, or just a clear safety glass that can be worn also.
Mike, I'd like to point out that was one of the doctor's recommendations too that he'd seen in his labs, that as an added precaution.
That is correct, sir. Dr. Shannon made that recommendation. We decided to adopt it and take a more conservative approach to safety on that one. Yes, sir.
Any comments from the committee or the board? It certainly seems like we are prepared as best we can be till first day of school, and to get through the first quarter. Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Mr. Trout, thank you for your time. Next, we want to talk about associated costs, because this plan does have some costs with it. We do have some money available under the CARES Act, and we got to talk about a couple things. One, the staffing cost that we spoke to earlier. Two, the computer cost. I wasn't aware of that, and that's on me. But we think we have some CARES funding set aside for that. And then I think with busing, I think we are okay with busing now. As a result, there will be a savings there, because if we bring sixth grade in 4 days a week, I think we'll be okay there. I do think the technology is a smart move. If we need this to work, then we need the right tools. I would ask Justin to explain to the group how much money is remaining in the CARES funding we have, so that way that can factor in decision. But you're looking at the majority, in fact, all of the staffing costs most likely coming out of our local general fund. With that, Mr. Zorchek, can you provide some clarity?
Yeah, Mike, at the last time I looked, which was earlier on this week, we had approximately $13,000 still remaining in CARES Act funds that haven't been allocated yet.
Okay, and Mr. Heinrich, anything you want to explain to the committee about the need for the computers again? I think you did a good job explaining it, but is there anything else you want to reiterate to the group?
Yeah, I believe that this is something, maybe if Randy's on and listening, he can clear up and correct anything I misspeak on. There's already a plan in place that's been approved within the budget for the replacement of these computers. Basically, what Randy would be asking for is to accelerate that budget a little bit. So even if we had to spend beyond the CARES Act fund, we would say, we wouldn't spend that money, down the road. So
you're saying this is a budgeted expense, Mr. Heinrich?
It is a budgeted expense, but not all of them are scheduled to be replaced this year. I believe that there's a rotating schedule. some of them were supposed to be replaced this year, but not all of them, and what Randy would need in order to satisfy this, or to solve this issue, I guess, would be to accelerate that budget a little bit. So we'd be spending money that isn't supposed to be spent till next year, this year. The problem is that the random access memory, the processing unit, how many things your computer can have open at one time is limited in these older computers. So in order to teach a class or hold a meeting like this and then still have your Promethean board open, your website open where you're, with your couple of activities open at the same time with all the kids' computers or cameras on, the computer will struggle to keep up with everything going as is. As we upgrade these computers, that will not be a problem anymore. So the issue is more like a classroom management issue. Like right now, those of you who have your camera on, I can see what you're doing. I can see if you're paying attention. I can see if you're, texting your friends or whatever. However, at the beginning of the year, until these computers are upgraded, we're probably going to have to recommend to teachers tell their students to turn their camera off, just so that the computer can keep up with what's going on. This upgrade will allow for us to tell our teachers to make the computer or make the teachers or make the students have their camera on so they can see what's going on with that child, make sure that they are on task and attentive, if that makes sense.
No, it does, Mr. Heinrich. I mean, I think if we're going to meet the moment in the area of synchronized learning, then we need the right equipment and tools. I'm glad there's some money remaining that lessens that impact, but we have to be upfront and transparent with the board. There is a cost associated, not only staffing, but the computer upgrades as well.
Randy, did I represent the budget issue well?
Yep, that's good. The associated cost of $28,000 that's listed there is actually just the part two. With everything that we have going on in a very fixed budget under normal circumstances. We've already ordered. I'm just waiting for the PO to be kind of printed so I can send it in. $28,000 already in equipment. It takes about 2 years per level to do the PCs. The elementaries we finished last summer, so this would have been the start of the junior and senior high. So I already had money in the budget for this, so we were already going to order approximately 70 some computers to get it started, and then of course finish it the summer after that. So with this additional $28,000, that will let me order 140 some computers right now, and do it in 1 year rather than do it across 2 years. Does that make sense?
No, it does. Mr. Harley, this is where we'll turn it over to the committee, because I think the committee needs to have some understanding about the costs associated with this, and while the team's on the phone, address any questions you may have, because we want to be honest and transparent that there are costs associated. And based on the memo I sent you earlier over the weekend, we're doing our best we can to lower the cost, but there are costs, and we don't want to deny that or not illustrate that or discuss it.
Mr. Vukovic, can I just clarify one thing on the computer purchase real quick?
Yeah, please, Mr. Cronin.
Just what we'd like to do is ask the board's permission to spend up to the $28,000. I know there's possibly some CARES funding to pay for that, but at this point, we're still pretty early in the year. Well, we haven't even started the school year to know how much PPE and those type of associated costs we will need just to get through the school year. The $28,000, if the board is willing to, would be taken out of the general fund, out of budgetary reserve for the year. And that would allow us to completely upgrade the junior and senior high. Now, if we get to the end of the year and we have not spent all the CARES funding, or actually by the end of October, when all the CARES funding needs to be spent, we could allocate some of that $28,000 back into the CARES funding to make sure we've used everything up. I just want to be upfront with the board that the CARES funding may not pay for all of that. And because Randy has already spent his budgeted money, we need permission to spend outside of his budget. And that would be what we're asking the board for, if the committee is willing to make that recommendation at the next board meeting.
Jared, this is equipment. Can any of this come out of capital funds?
It certainly can. Yeah. I mean, we would just have to word the motion a little bit differently to revise the capital reserve budget.
Okay, so there would be a way to ease the pain a little bit on the general fund. Walter, I think your mic's still on.
Tom, I'd just like to add, I think that's something that the chair of audit and finance at least needs to be involved in. So maybe an email would be helpful before it shows up as an agenda item.
Yeah, I was just wondering if it was even possible to. So
no. I mean, on spending the money,
oh,
regardless of where it comes from.
Well,
She's not able to be on this call, so I don't want anybody to be blindsided. And if it's going to be on the agenda tomorrow, we clearly need to have a conversation with her before then.
Okay, the proposal though is up to 28,000, and this is accelerating 2 years worth of computer purchases into one. We also have a problem getting the equipment in the kids' hands, but I think the committee would certainly make that recommendation that we at least attempt it. I think, Mike, if you can send Julie a summation of the additional costs and savings when we finish this up, I think that would, and maybe that goes out to the whole board, that would be very useful.
No, I agree. Valerie and you are both correct. I'll ask Jared to follow up with as he supports Madam Vice President in Audit and Finance. So Jared, go ahead, follow up. But Jared, while we have you on the line, I do want you to explain how we got to the cost of $160,000 per 9 weeks for the temporary staff, so the board understands how we calculated this number. I know when I first wrote to him, I told him on the high side what it was, but I would like you to spend some time explaining to the committee how that number came to fruition, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure. We were estimating early on about $25,000 per quarter for a long-term sub, which is on the high end. That's taking into account family health care, at least step one, instructional one, which most of our long-term subs do not take family health care. Some of them don't even take health care. So that was kind of on the high side of 8. At $25,000 would be the $200,000. And then we had some additional savings through transportation. We're going back and negotiating if we don't have to do a secondary bus run with our contractor on Wednesdays, what would that look like? Mr. Travis and myself are estimating somewhere around savings on that of $27,000 to $28,000. Again, we're still in the process of negotiating with STA on that because there would be some savings for them on bus drivers, fuel, those type of areas if we don't have to do a secondary run on every Wednesday. We were also looking at some savings of you then wouldn't need substitutes for teachers on or secondary teachers on Wednesdays as well. So all that kind of taken into account, we would be looking probably instead of around 200,000 for if we're looking at 8 long-term subs, we're probably looking somewhere around 160,000 per quarter for the long-term subs, which would ensure our social distancing at the K-5 buildings.
Thank you, Mr. Cronauer. Mr. Harley, I'll turn it over to you because I know how much this is important to everyone, and we want to make sure you have a chance to address any questions or comments that our committee does as a whole.
Yeah, I'm going to bounce it back to the committee members. Where do you think of this? Where are we going with this? Walter?
Tom, I just wanted to back up just a little bit. I certainly agree with Luda as far as getting hold of Julia, but we do have another board meeting scheduled for next Monday night. If we're not able to get this work through Julia in time enough for tomorrow's, we do have the option of approving it, at that meeting. The other option we could do would be to authorize the spending of the money and then determine which fund it comes out once the finance committee has kind of figured that out. I think there's probably pretty strong support for the spending of the computers. I think the real question will be to figure out which pot of money it comes out of.
I'm not sure where you want to go with this, Walter, but we don't have a lot of time. I don't think this is a decision that we can ponder for a few weeks. So I would certainly move that that the committee puts it on the agenda for tomorrow night, puts the staffing on the agenda for tomorrow night, and solidify this plan and roll it out.
Tom,
yes,
can
please.
can we get a cost? Because I feel like it's been kind of compartmentalized with here's how much the long-term subs would be, here's this computers, here's transportation. I need a bottom line number.
Well,
What are we talking?
yeah, you have up to 160,000 for staffing, right, Mike? You have some savings on busing. We have the additional computers. What else am I missing here?
I think let us draft all that up together. You're correct as far as those costs that we're aware of. We'll give Jared some time tomorrow to get that out to the committee and let them have the total number. I don't think that's an unfair request whatsoever. We can get that out to you tomorrow, so that way when you vote informed. If you choose to vote on it, you vote informed, but we can get that. But those are two major costs. Mr. Cronauer, would you agree with that? Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think we pretty much covered most of the costs here, but I will do a summary for the board and get that out to them.
Yeah, the board can always table it for tomorrow night. If we have the overall picture, maybe we can move it forward. I know that time is of the essence here. This is not June, and getting a plan solidly in place, I think, is extremely important.
Jared, I don't think it needs to be real fancy. I think an Excel file that just lists the cost and what it's for. I don't need narrative or any of that.
Yeah, and the savings.
Thank you.
And the savings.
Yep, absolutely.
Are you okay with that, Mr. Cronauer? Can you handle that for us?
Yep, I can work on that for you tonight even.
Okay, Jared, we'll give you about 5 minutes if you want to send that to us. Go ahead, Walter.
Yeah, Tom, I'm not saying that we shouldn't act on this tomorrow night. What I'm suggesting is I don't see anything wrong with authorizing the spending of the money for the various issues, but we may have to, Julia may want some time to figure out which pot of money it actually comes out of. Having that discussion next week at the Finance Committee really won't slow down the process. It would just simply be an accounting issue on Jared's part.
Yeah, I agree, Walter. That would work. Any other comments from the committee?
I wanted to ask Jared, the CARES Act money that we have, am I remembering correctly that we have a deadline by which we have to have it spent? Or have they changed that now?
Ms. Cinda, I think you're right. I'll defer to Jared and Justin, but I think it's the end of October, isn't it, when we had to use it?
Yes, the federal CARES funding is the end of October to spend that. I know there's been people advocating to have that extended across the state because it was a very short timeline and the pandemic certainly is not going to be over by then, but as of now, it still is October 31st.
Jared, Mike, there's also a chance of additional education funding coming out of Washington and Harrisburg.
I know there's people advocating for it. Can I tell you that Congress will meet the moment? I have no clue. Could they? They may.
No, I understand that. There is some discussion about helping education.
There is some discussion, yes, sir. How much? I don't know that, sir, with certainty. So, Mr. Harley, is there any other questions? You know, Mr. Luther brought up a good point. We'll get that out to you, let you have a look at it so you have time to digest it, because I know it's a lot in one evening, and we'll vote tomorrow. But again, we'll get that out to you. That gives you time, and we are presenting you alternatives. If you say no to the funding, We have alternatives in place, but we'll at least get that out to you, break down the cost. And I think it's a good point. It's a fair point.
Is the plan that's the administration has put forth to the committee, is there any reason that we should not recommend this to the board and recommend the funding at, that we move it forward to the board as a agenda item tomorrow night? I'm hearing a lot of silence here.
Tom, this is Warner. I'll step out on it. I understand that Thursday is the first day that the teachers are scheduled back, and so there is sort of a crunch or timeline. Assuming there isn't, I mean, we really spent a lot of time trying to get this thing right, albeit with outside influences and interference. But I think we need to come to a conclusion here tomorrow night and give Mike and the team the direction they need when they welcome the teachers back on Thursday morning.
Tamara, Cinda, do you have anything to say?
This is Tamara. So I have been a proponent of giving everybody the opportunity to come back, and I'm mostly concerned about our early learners. So the K-5, I'm very interested in getting them back 5 days, if at all possible. Our, especially 4 and 5, I know that's what's going to cost us the most money. But if we think about those 4th graders, they only had reading and instruction. I mean, they were in a very prime part of their reading education last spring when we went online, and with the chaos and parents working in our curriculum didn't mesh with online learning. I just feel very, very strongly that we need to bring those 4th and 5th graders that families want them to come back the opportunity, especially those who may be at-risk readers or at-risk in math. Anyway, so I just feel, I understand there's a cost to that. I hope that we can work with the association to get the temporary teachers in a manner that we can afford them. But just my viewpoint, I think I support this if the costs and the negotiations go well, at least for the first quarter, and we can see and get everybody in school as much as possible, and hopefully it will last longer than that. I guess it'll be the community's decision as to, how strict we are and if we really do follow the rules and can get the students back. So anyway, I support it.
Linda, how about you?
Tamara is right. It's a lot of it is up to the community and how well they encourage their children and try to keep everybody following the rules so that everybody can stay healthy. If they don't do that, or if, maybe a teacher doesn't follow the rules, but if our schools are shut down for any reason, I'm still very concerned about having to pay for temporary teachers who may not work the entire 9 weeks. So I think we still need to be very, very careful about how that is going to happen. And I hope, as Tamara says, I hope the negotiations go well.
Terry, I see you're on the call. Do you have anything to say?
I just echo what the rest of them said there. I think too, we need to shore up how, if we go virtual, we only go in classroom so long and then we go totally virtual. I don't think it makes a lot of sense that we have to continue to pay those temporary teachers. So hopefully that is clarified. Thank you.
Tammy, I see you're on the call. What do you think?
Yeah, I am all for the kids going back full-time, the kindergarten through 5th, and as many as we get into the building as possible. Because I know that children just really need the structure and the face-to-face time. And to keep them as safe as we can with the masks is going to be an ongoing battle, but I think it's one we have to go for.
Barb, how about you? Mike, what I hear from the board is that we want to pursue this. Let's get it on the agenda for tomorrow night. Jared's working on the numbers. We understand that those numbers are going to be estimates, and the way Jared does things is going to be worst case scenarios. So give us the bad news, and let us talk about it tomorrow night at the board meeting.
Yes, sir. We'll do that. If it's okay with you, then I'll move on to letter F, if that's okay.
I'm sorry, say again?
If it's okay with you, I'll move on to letter F.
Yes, please.
Could I interject? I'm having a hard time. I think we're having a hard time clarifying something in the chat. There's a question about the synchronous learners. I think double dipping because they're going to be with this, the A group of hybrid learners and the B group of hybrid learners. And I think the miscommunication is that the plan with this hybrid model is all the children will be attending school 5 days a week. It's just a matter of how they'll be attending. The teachers at the secondary level will be moving through a lesson each of the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Half of the group will be attending live in person. The other half will be attending virtually along with those students who have chosen synchronous learning. So the teacher will move forward with the curriculum every day. The synchronous learning students will attend every day, but they will see new learning, new activities, new lessons every time. Because we're going to move forward and Google those kids in from the outside. I hope that answers the question. If not, please ask me in the chat and I will try my best to clarify. Go ahead, Mr. V.
No, thank you. Good point, Mr. Heinrich.
Mike?
Yes, sir.
Mike, I'm assuming you're also going to talk about some of the number of cases that might trigger some changes as well here. I'm assuming that's item G. But before you start into F, I want to make it very clear to the public that you heard everybody here support trying to get our kids, especially the younger learners, back in the classroom. That is absolutely our goal. That is absolutely what we want to do. But I think Mike is going to present some information in F and possibly in G that could jeopardize this, our ability to do that. And jeopardize it in a way that's no control of this board or the administration. So I want everybody to understand we're doing our best to make sure we get the kids back in, but there may be some additional things coming down the road that may alter that plan, possibly even before we get it off the ground. Thanks, Mike.
No, thank you, Mr. President. And you're right. I want to spend some time talking about F and G. Under F, Department of Health mask requirement at 2:20 p.m. today, we received information that the Department of Health now, regardless of social distancing in place or not, is required to have mask on at all times. Now, they did then went back and give some clarity regarding when can students remove face coverings, and it's illustrated here under the sub-item number 1 under letter F. So under what circumstances are they permitted to remove the face coverings? They're able to do it while eating or drinking when faced 6 feet apart, which our principals went over and explained at lunch that will meet that requirement. And as well as when they're wearing face covering creates an unsafe condition which to operate or execute a task, or at least 6 feet apart during face covering breaks to last no longer than 10 minutes. So again, just to go back down some history, at one point they were strongly required, strongly recommended, and now you see within a week, week and a half, 2 weeks, they shifted their stance, and we're going to need people to adhere to that and surrender to that. It's not our decision, but we have a responsibility to adhere to the Department of Health's requirements because that's the edict they gave us, and we just need our help with everyone pulling together to make sure we do this. We understand the need for and request for our community to be open, to stay open, but it's fragile if that, and it depends on everyone's ability to follow the rules and guidelines that are set forth by the Department of Health, which the district has an opportunity to to adhere to. So I put on there just to make sure everyone understands it. And I put on there, again, to illustrate the point how much it's changed since our last meeting. And I expect it to continue to change more. And I hope I'm wrong. But we'll do our best to continue, depending on the board vote tomorrow night, late tomorrow, early Wednesday. We'll get this out to the families so they understand what we're looking at. Because I think things could get lost in translation. But that way they're fully aware of what's going on. Now, letter G is where, Randy, if you could scroll down to letter G. A little bit more, I'm sorry, sir. Letter G is where it gets somewhat different and difficult. On Thursday, August 13th, I think around 5 p.m., the state released some recommendations for pre-K to 12 schools following identification of a case of COVID-19. Again, it came on August 13th. I am concerned about their measures and metrics. There's a video I attached to this that you can watch, and we're going to need some clarification from the Department of Health. In the end of the day, until we get that clarification, we are going to surrender to their direction and take a conservative approach. And that's what we need to do. But let me share my screen, and I want to show you what they came up with and they just released to us, because I think it's important for not only the board to know, but the entire committee and the public to know. So allow me 1 minute to pull this up. So on my screen, you could see they came up with a table, a chart, and this is the course of action they would take, the Department of Health would take, I'm assuming, in case there is a confirmed case. So you're looking at two factors. Going vertically is the level of community transmission in the county, low, moderate, substantial. As we know, we just checked as of Friday, we're still in the moderate level. And then,
Can you make that? I'm sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. You want it bigger, right, Ms. Lowry? There we go. Is that good? All right. So again, and I apologize for not blowing the screen up.
Thank you.
No worries whatsoever. So level of community transmission, right? That's going down vertically. So low, moderate, substantial. We know for the last 3 weeks since they started monitoring and measuring it, we are in the moderate level. Going horizontally across, they tell you what happens, the number of cases within a 14-day period. And you got to pay attention to this because it can control and dictate what happens to us at no fault of our own, but we have to surrender to the guidance and direction they give us. So in this case, they have 3 options: 1 student or 1 staff, 2 to 4 students staff in the same building, or less than 5% of total number of student staff in a school building, or multiple school buildings with individual cases. And then it goes 5 greater than 5%. And if you scroll down and you look, let's just hypothetically look at the middle column, the 14-day period, and we know we're at a moderate level. If we have 2 cases, either in 1 building or in multiple school buildings, which cases are not household contacts, the Department of Health could require us to close schools for 5 to 7 days, clean the areas where cases spent time, and then public health staff will direct close contacts to quarantine. And here's my concern. I would ignore the 5% number because I get it. More than 1, in this case 2, would still be less than 5%. But if you look 5% or less of our total high school population, that number could be in the high 30s, low 40s. The middle school could be high numbers, and the elementaries could be high numbers. So I don't like the way they phrased that. I understand their intention. I'm not a fan of it. I would say that the community and public needs to be aware of this number. So in this case, 1 student or 1 staff, we're going to remain open under a moderate designation because that's where we're at. But if things change and we get 2 to 4 staff or students in the same building, right, or in multiple school buildings with individual cases, you're looking at they're probably going to recommend us to close for 5 to 7 days. Now, I'm hoping more information comes out and clarifies this. But again, we're going to surrender to the Department of Health's guidance and leadership because they are the experts in this case, and we have a responsibility to do so. I just want to be, when I talk about the plan being fragile and how we're trying to build consistency, we're building something, trying to build consistency out of something that's really inconsistent. And it's not any fault of our own. It just reemphasizes the need to make sure we all adhere to the guidelines that we put in place, and let's do our best to meet that moment because you could see the threshold to close could be very small. And I don't know if they're going to stick to this. I don't know what they're going to do, but I think in order, I know this board values transparency and tough conversations. We need to be clear where this is at. And you could see what happens if there's 5 or more students and staff in the same building. So again, I just thought this was important to bring to light. I think it's important for the committee, the public, to be aware of this and understand and surrender the fact that this would be the decision of the Department of Health, who we adhere to and follow, because in this case, they would have the authority. And we need to all understand that. Now, can it change tomorrow? Sure. Will it? I don't know. But I think for the sake of this group and the sake of transparency, I know this board's doing everything they can to try to open up in a safe and responsible manner. But you have to understand it could come down to the Department of Health shutting us down, right? And it's not to scare anyone. It's not to upset or hurt anyone. It's all about transparency and people understanding the facts and conditions in which we're working with. And I think that's important because when you look at some of the motions going on, people are asking us or wondering us why we're doing this. Some of these decisions aren't at our discretion, right? And I understand that when some of these things first came out, they were recommendations. Now you see some of these things turning into requirements. And I could be wrong on this, but the threshold for error is small. And I understand that, and I'm not debating it. I just want to communicate that to you and the public because that is what we'll be having to work under. And if that makes sense, Mr. Harley.
Mike, could you didn't say what happens if we're in the moderate range and we get 5 students with a positive? How many days do we get shut down for?
So if we're in moderate range and we get more than 5 cases, so 5, like 6, 5 or more, 5 or more, they would shut us down in moderate range for 14 days.
Okay, that's what I thought. Thank you.
Now, Ms. Cinda, I don't know if this will change tomorrow. I don't know what the Department of Health is going to do. We haven't got much information. I know they're overwhelmed and working hard, but my own goal is not to scare anyone. My goal is not to upset anyone. My goal, though, is to be transparent. That's exactly what the recommendation we're getting everyone. If that makes sense, Ms. Cinda.
Yes, it makes sense, and it also gets me up on my soapbox again. Everybody has to try to do everything they can to make sure that you keep your children and yourselves safe, because it's the whole school shutting down is what is at risk, and we want the kids to go to school, but everybody has to work really hard at trying to stay following the rules and stay safe.
They do, Ms. Cinda, and I don't want to get political, so I'm not, but I will say this to your point, Ms. Cinda. I think you're absolutely right, and I would say this. You have 2 viewing parties, right? 2 viewing schools of thought on this, left and right, and then their school stuck in the middle. And then we have a community who says, look, let's open our schools the safest way possible and make sure we can get our kids educated and get them in school safely. And the plan reflects that and also gives families the choice they may want and they may need. But you're right, Ms. Cinda, this plan only works if everyone follows the guidelines to a T. And I don't want to be melodramatic. I just want to overemphasize the sensitivity maybe or how fragile it is. And I don't want to hide from that, Ms. Cinda, and I can't hide from that, right? You asked us to come up with a plan that puts the kids in the seats the best can we do responsibly, safely, and we did that with social distancing and guideline and adhering to recommendations. But the plan is only as good as it's executed. And I'm not placing fault on anyone. We have great families. We're blessed to have what we have here, but we have to really address that because that's where that lies. Does that make sense, Ms. Cinda?
Makes absolute sense, and it brings me to the next point that I always get on my soapbox about. There is a chance, and a lot of it depends on how people react, but things can happen if we do end up closing. Childcare for the youngest children is still going to be an issue, and I don't know how. I'm really glad that I don't have children to have to deal with this, but the parents need to be prepared to have childcare somehow available for their children if we suddenly get shut down. So relatives or neighborhood groups, church groups, they have to try to have something ready. In April, we had no clue, or March, we had no clue, and it just hit us. We've had the whole summer. We have to be prepared.
Yeah, and Ms. Cinda, if I can get on my soapbox, I'll join you right next to you. Here's my concern. We've been building this since March. We thought we had a plan. We approved it. And now come August 17th, things are still changing. So the community has to understand I have a responsibility to be responsive to the edict recommendations that we're given. And it may change that again. And I don't know, Ms. Linda, and I'm not trying to be doomsday, but we all have to try to keep communicating together. I think that's important, if you agree.
Absolutely.
So, Mr. Harley, that was F and G. I know I went over that quickly, but I thought that was important for the community to know.
Mike, this is Walter. I had a quick question though. On that chart you were showing where it got into the multiple buildings, like it said, 2 to 4, 5+, or 5%, and then the third option was in multiple buildings. That seemed to be as confusing as far as I'm concerned as to the percentage. Perhaps when you're talking to these folks from PDE, maybe we could get some clarification on that, because is it 2 to 4 in each building, or is it 2 to 4 total scattered over a number of different buildings? It kind of all sounds like the real issue is the 2 to 4 or the 5 is the absolute number, and the rest of it's just garbage.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it could be either or, Mr. President. And what I mean by that, the way I read it, and I'm not the Department of Health, and we reached out for clarity. And unfortunately, we haven't got an answer yet. And we have to keep following up because I know how busy they are. I think it's both, sir. I think it's 2 to 4 in one building, or more than 2 to 4 in all the district, as long as they're not related, is the way I read that. Now, I could be wrong, but we're trying to get clarity. And again, this just came out on the 13th, and we're trying to get some more information.
Yeah, I'm just not sure I understand what the difference is, I guess,
So I think the important thing is that, while we've been working on a plan since March or longer, it seems like longer, there's constantly changes and more information that's being given to us, or we've just been informed that, the rules are kind of changing. And we really are trying to get to the point where we can make a decision that meets the needs of all of our students, or as many of our students, and gives families options. But things could change that we have absolutely no control over. And I think this is so closely tied to what our medical system can do and the approach that the hospital's taking on symptom-based response for cases of COVID-19. And none of those are things that we can control. We just have to work within those frameworks. And so as tired and as frustrated as our families are, I think we probably all join them in that, just because I feel like we've been building the plane as we're flying it, and we keep getting parts that are on back order or have to be replaced. And we're hearing what folks are saying, and hopefully families can find an option that works for them and meets their needs.
And the only thing I would say, Mr. President, Ms. Lauer was spot on. It was elegant, it was accurate, and I'll stand by the work we did. I'll stand by trying to build 4, 5, 6 different options for families to try to meet everyone's needs, and it's incredibly difficult. And please, I don't feel sorry for myself. We have to meet the moment for our kids in our community, and we have to give flexibility to our families the best we can. It's changing quick, and I don't want families to think that we didn't meet the moment or we didn't prepare accordingly. It's just, like you saw, today, it's changing quickly. So I think Ms. Lowry is elegant, and I thought her points were well taken and spot on.
I have a question. If in a child's household, one member has to quarantine, is the child also going to be required to quarantine for 14 days?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it's possible.
Barb, there's a video that PDE put out today that talks about who all needs to be involved in that quarantine and how long that will actually take. I'll find the link and shoot it to you. If I can find it now, I can post it in the chat.
And I think what's going to happen, and the reason why I say I don't know, Miss Barker, is, and I'm not a doctor or a nurse, and please, I don't even pretend to be one. And if any of our nurses are on here and could bail me out, it'd be greatly appreciated. I think what's at stake here would be the type of symptoms they're having. So maybe they can come back in 10 days or 14 days, but on the 10th or 14th day, whatever that measure or metric is, if the symptoms continue, then they may not be able to. Again, that's please a bad overview, and I don't want to mislead you, but I think the question is, you could be right, or the answer, right? It depends on the symptoms and the individual. And if there's any nurses, any of our nurses on the line, please save me. If not, I'll try to get you the answer.
I'm here, Mike. This is Beth Mock. Hi.
Hi, Beth.
Hi, and I'm online. And it's, if somebody in your household is quarantined, it's a almost 100% certainty that the student will be too. Everybody in the household will be for at least 10 days after the first symptom, or at least as long as the person who is quarantined is quarantined. And you'll have to wait that 14 days out to see if you develop any of the symptoms.
And then, Beth, it could go longer if you do, or if the other person has symptoms. So it could go, correct?
It can actually go up to almost 3 weeks, depending on when one person got it. And if somebody doesn't get it until 14 days later, it can go on, yes, up to 3 weeks.
Second kind of part question to that is, if they take a test and they're negative, will they be allowed to come back, or should they still continue their 14-day quarantine?
They have, according to Dr. Shannon, they will have to continue their 14 days in quarantine if somebody in the household has it, if it's a positive case, because there are false negatives. And
Beth, and this is going to be directed by the Department of Health. We really have very little options on what the Department of Health does here. Is that correct?
That's correct. They are going to lead us every step of the way. They'll tell us what we need to do.
And I think Miss Beth is right, and that's how we interpret it as a team. We could be wrong, but we think they're going to take control of the situation, sir.
Can I ask a quick question? Mrs. Mock will probably be able to answer. My wonderful child has crazy allergies, so they're going to look just like COVID symptoms. What should I, like, as soon as she starts looking like that, because she is key person who will go through a whole box of Kleenex in a day, should I be keeping her home at that point?
That depends on how ill she is. The nurse in the building where she goes now should pretty much know who her asthmatics are and what students have the severe allergies. And if she's well enough to come to school and not running a fever, not coughing, she's able to be in the classroom, I would send her, as long as the nurse in the building that she's at, they know that she has allergies.
Yes,
we don't want to keep right. We don't want to keep everybody away, because we know a lot of kids do have allergies, and they'll hit in the fall and in the spring. And as long as they're not having problems breathing or running a fever, I think it's best to send them.
Okay, perfect. I just wanted to double check because she's known for that hit September. Thank you.
No, and Miss Jess, that's a great question. Miss Beth, would you also agree that, not to put more pressure on our parents, but there should be conversations with the nurse and the parent about the child, so they kind of have an idea what's coming in, and they may already, but just to continue that conversation so everyone's on board, because we're going to take a conservative approach as we look at some of these symptoms, and I think that conversation would help. Is that a fair statement, Miss Beth?
Absolutely. I think it's a very fair statement that the nurse and the student's parent should be in close contact.
I agree. I will keep in contact. We already are in general, so
good.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Mock, one of the teenagers I know, very close to me, came up with a question. I thought it was a pretty good one. What if a kid in the classroom sneezes or coughs and their mask gets contaminated? Should they have an extra one on hand, or?
Yes, we will have extra masks available. The nurses' offices are also equipped with their own PPE. So there will be plenty of extra masks available. And I saw a question on there somewhere about students that don't have symptoms. And yes, we've talked at length about this. A lot of kids are asymptomatic. We just have to work with what we can see, what we can measure and determine.
Can somebody correct me if I'm wrong? Are we still encouraging the parents to provide their children with masks also? And we're going to have a supply that can be used in case of emergency or if a child forgets their mask? Are we still asking the parents to do that?
Yes, Ms. Cinda. Another reason we're doing it is for two reasons. One, we think since this has been in March, most parents will probably have them, so we're going to ask them to continue. And then two, if they need one or something happens and forget it, we can definitely provide. But we did previously communicate that, asking all parents to do that. We did order an abundance of backup because we understand things happen. Someone can lose them, forget them, or they get dirty. So we're trying to plan. Yes, we're trying to ask them to bring them in, but we'll have some for those who need it, if that makes sense, Ms. Cinda.
Yep, thank you.
So are there any other questions with regards to letter G? I know it's a big deal, and I want to turn it over to Mr. McElhaney and Mr. Travis to talk about busing. But I want to make sure that we're okay on the same page with regards to letter G, understanding the sensitivity, understanding the threshold, and how we're going to have to surrender to the guidance they give us. I think, again, not to scare anyone, but to be completely upfront, honest with everyone, because I think they deserve that and need to know that. Okay, nothing heard. I want Mr. Heinrich to talk about the health hybrid rooms, but also before we get to that, busing for CTC and what that may look like, because their schedule hasn't changed at this point. It may change, who knows? But I'd like to give Mr. Travis and Mr. McElhaney some time to discuss some issues or concerns they may have there. Gentlemen.
Thank you, Mr. Vukovic. We were informed by ICTC that they'll be beginning their program, their classes a week prior to when we start school on September 8th. They are going to be doing 5 days face-to-face instruction, and they are letting us know so that if there's anything we can do in getting our students to ICTC, that we could help in doing that. Regarding when we begin September 8th, I've been in communication with Mr. Travis about how we can indeed get our students who are engaged in synchronous learning to get to ICTC on their days of synchronous learning. For if they are attending school here on the 2 days, which they're designated to do so, naturally they'll be able to take the bus to ICTC. So on that Wednesday, and depending on which 2 days, depending on which group they're in, we're trying to work through some issues to make sure that we have busing. So I asked Mr. Travis about ways in which we might be able to do that. I do know that a few years ago we had a model where we could provide cursory stops throughout the district, hubs, if you will, so the students can get there. Mr. Travis, are you on? Do you want to take it from there?
Yeah, thanks, Mr. McElhaney. If some of you board members recall, when ICTC did start well before our school year, you asked us to provide transportation for those students. What we ended up doing was we did use a couple of school buses. We made, as Mr. McElhaney described it, hub stops, centrally located stops that we asked the parents to get the students to those locations, and we would provide transportation to and from ICTC on those days. Similarly is what we're going to try to do with our synchronous learning model. We'll have, I'm anticipating using 3 buses to cover the district, again, centrally located stops, as well as the buses stopping at the senior high school to get students that are currently, that would be attending on those days, Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday, Friday. And that would provide transportation for those students up to ICTC. On Monday, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Fridays, the buses would be able to return them to the senior high school where they would be able to board their regular school buses to go home. On Wednesdays, it would be just like the days prior to our school year starting, where those students, the 3 buses would leave from ICTC and take the students directly to the central hubs, where parents would have to pick them up.
So, Mr. Harley, we'll turn over you and the committee, see if there's any questions. But Mike, real quick, and I apologize if I didn't miss this, is there a cost for the board to consider?
There is additional cost. Anticipating an extra cost of about $150 a day for the 3 extra, or for the buses, for the extra or the extended runs. So for a 9-week period, it's around $6,700 or so. Again, we are anticipating a little bit of savings because we're negotiating with our contractor regarding the Wednesday elementary only runs. Haven't spoke directly with them, but we're sort of going through channels. Our savings might be more on the lines of around $18,000 to $20,000 for the 9-week period. So the cost of the ICTC transportation probably would be covered. The extra cost would be covered by the savings that we're going to get from the Wednesday transportation.
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. Mr. Harley, I'll defer to you, the group. Is there any questions regarding this?
Yeah, committee, do you have any questions on this? It seems pretty straightforward as much as we can do.
No questions.
Okay.
No questions.
Okay, Mike, I think we can move on.
Tom, this is Terry Kerr. I have a question on the busing. Is it, knowing that we're not going to have as many students riding our buses, are we able to look at that and possibly reduce the number of budgets? Or Mike or Jared, or I guess I'll ask you, are we not allowed to do that?
Mr. Travis and Mr. Cronauer, if you want to respond.
Terry, you're asking if we don't need as many buses to bring students in?
Yeah, because I think a lot of us are hearing that parents are going to transport their students to school.
Terry, we heard that the population of Ben Franklin is going to be about 2/3 of what it normally is. So I would assume that means that the buses are going to be at least no more than 2/3 full from where they normally are. So Terry's question would be, does that mean that we can reduce the buses? Is there any savings with only transporting 2,000 people instead of 2,800?
Not knowing who these students are just yet, because I have not received the information on who is going to be coming to school full time and who's going to be taking advantage of the ideal option. I don't. It will. I'm anticipating the number of students being reduced per bus. We're still pretty full as far as buses. I did my best to limit the buses to two students per seat, but I was not able to do that on some of them just based on the numbers that we have. And I set up routes based on everybody returning to school, in anticipation of everybody returning to school, and we'll be able to break out the students that choose not to come to school full time. The only issue is we still have the area to cover, and that takes time. So to maintain the schedule that we have between secondary and elementary schools, I need a number of buses to cover the district. So I don't know that we'd be able to reduce number of buses based solely on the number of students riding.
So I have a question that relates to that. I think in somebody's presentation, maybe Dr. Minix, he said that, or somebody, yeah, I think it was him that said that A through L comes Monday, Tuesday, and then M through Z comes Thursday, Friday. Has anybody considered, instead of doing that model to decide who comes to school in the upper grades, we do Shalakta and different neighborhoods come on Monday, Tuesday, and that might be able to decrease some of the transportation costs.
I can't speak for Mr. Minnick, but I'm thinking that by going with that model, you're going to create a whole lot of other issues as far as classroom, number of students in the classroom and things of that nature. I don't know that your cost savings is going to be worth the problems that are going to arise from doing it that way.
Yeah, Mike, I appreciate you jumping in. That was a game attempt. I honestly, Ms. Leeper, I'm not even sure where I would begin to distinguish between geographic areas. The A through L, M through Z model, even in itself, as clean as that sounds, is not perfectly clean. It presents some bubbles in terms of where we're accounting for siblings that have different last names but are coming from the same family to be on the same page for that model. We also have a bubble in one of our grades where it is not an even split. So even in that model that seems to be on paper a clean model, A to L, M to Z, there are challenges with distributing students in a manner that's honoring the social distance as well as creating the best learning environment. So I'm not even sure. I have not considered that. I haven't heard that model proposed, the geographic one, that is. At this point in time, we hadn't considered it.
That's fine. I just thought I'd throw it out there because it was a topic of, of geography. So that's fine. I appreciate everything you guys are doing. I know that this is the constant changes that you're dealing with and all of the pieces that need to fit together to do what we want to do is very difficult. So I'm okay with it if it can't work. I just, I appreciate everything everybody's doing.
Tamara, this is Walter. I actually think it's a really good idea. The problem is that 3 days before the teachers come back, there just isn't the time to actually vet it to see whether or not it couldn't be worked out. And I think we're kind of to the point where we just have to go with what we got. And, our brainstorming sessions are kind of over at this point until we see what, how this is actually going to work out. However, I will say this, that should this thing drag into next year, God forbid, that is something that we should maybe take a look at next spring as to whether or not that's a way to reduce those busing costs. I just think we kind of missed the boat on it time-wise, but it's a good idea.
Mr. Harley, so we covered number one. We still have some other things we'd like to get to tonight, but is there any other questions about item number one before I move on to number two?
Mike, I'd like to point out to the public that we haven't heard from PIAA and the WPIAL on the athletic. We're still waiting for those decisions to come down on competition. We're still in a practice mode at this point.
That's correct, sir. I'm expecting August 21st to be some more correspondence come out. I think that was the original deadline, but as we know, that can change as well, sir.
Okay, I think we can move on.
Okay, number two, grant assistant agreement with IUP. You previously approved this months ago. We just had to draw up a draft agreement, a contract as an independent contractor. You can click on the link and you can see the contract. If the board feels comfortable, we'd like to vote on that tomorrow night. This is the one for $25,000 to come in and support some of the SEL needs of our students. She could do a lot of things except for doing the evals of a school psychologist. Again, the committee previously approved this. We just now have a contract for you to vote on. It's pretty straightforward. The academic committee was in support of it months ago. This is now just formalizing it and finalizing it for this individual. Any questions, sir?
No questions. Let's move ahead. Let's bring that to the board.
Okay. Number 3, I'll turn it over to Mr. Heinrich. I think he wants to discuss the BCIT course changes at the junior high. I think there's some changes made to accommodate the additional days. Is that correct, Mr. Heinrich?
Yes, sir. The BCIT teachers worked over the summer to accommodate changes we made to the schedule in a pre-COVID world. Back in April, when, or maybe it was, I don't remember, but February, when the world was right. What they had to accommodate was we added several days, I believe 18 days or something, to their schedule. What they did, sir, was they took pieces of our digital citizenship class and our computer class that they couldn't always fit in, and they added it to the BCIT course, which is appropriate. BCIT, for the public, stands for Business Communications and Information Technology. So it's in line with those two things. So there's no real significant changes. These are already things you've already approved. They're just making sure that they're addressed in this course. The packet, Ms. Markle should have had this, the new curriculum included in your packet, and we're going to put this on next Monday's agenda to be approved.
Any questions, Mr. Hurley?
No questions from me. Any committee? Rob, move that ahead.
Okay. I'll defer to you for number 4 as well. This is pretty straightforward, but I'll defer to you. Make it quick.
Yes, sir. Every year, the board approves mentors who are paid to guide our new hires through their first year. The recommendations have been asked of these teachers and accepted if the board will approve Miss Alicia Clark, Kendall Walker, Rob Stewart, and Brenda Pierce as mentors for our new hires: Zoe Gailey, Julianne Bothell, Tara Maruka, and Tracy Pecora.
Again,
yeah, I think we can do that, Mike. I believe these mentors get a few bucks.
there is a stipend associated per the contract, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think you can move that ahead to the board meeting next week.
Sir. Okay. Jared, I'll turn over the dump truck to you, sir.
He's refusing to talk to you, Mike.
Yeah, I don't. What we'll do is we'll move on. If he jumps back on, we'll go back to the dump truck.
There he is.
Oh, there we go.
Sorry, Mr. Vukovic. Yeah, I just wanted to update at least the committee before I'd like to get this approved at the next board meeting next Monday. Is the bid or the results of our dump truck bid that we put out a couple weeks ago. We received 4 bids. We got our high bid is $15,000.
Woohoo! That's half our computers.
Yes. So that money will go back into the capital reserve. We received 4 bids. Like I said, the highest bid is just over $15,000. And we had the lowest bid was as low as $2,100. So myself and Mr. Trout, we were both pretty happy with that. We will get, if we receive board approval on Monday, we will then start the process of signing it over to its new owner.
Okay, move that forward.
Okay.
What do you want, Mike?
Okay, non-agenda items. Number 1, last month we came to you and talked to you about the idea of purchasing some software for the junior high to be able to do Corel at home and safely remotely. We needed, again, we need those costs for Ike and Horseman to do the same thing. So let me address 1 and 2 together. We also are asking the board to pay for Google Enterprise cost, which will continue our access to additional features in Meet and Google Classroom. It's about $7,000. And Justin, I'll put you on the spot, but basically when Justin says, look, there's $13,000 left in CARES Fund, we incorporated the $7,000 for Google. So we had 20. We took 7 out for the Google Enterprise cost, which now gets us to 13. And the $2,500 we could use from the CARES Act or the grant that Justin wrote, and we got through COVID-related expenditures. So basically, let me take 1, 2, 3 all together. And again, reiterate, Number one, we need software called Soundtrap. We did it at the junior high. We'd like to take it down to Ike and Horace Mann. We'd like to use the CARES funding or the Highmark grant that Justin got. Number two, the Google Enterprise cost, it's $7,000. They changed their features. Some of it's no longer free. We'd like to use the CARES funding act to get this done so we can move forward and support our synchronized learning efforts. And then the Highmark grant, the board would simply like to accept those grants. We got $3,000, and we have a lot of leeway to use for COVID related expenditures. Justin, anything you want to reiterate or explain that I may have misspoke about, sir?
No, you addressed it all. Just $3,000, and that can go to pay for anything COVID related. So that could go towards PPE, that could go towards technology, that is anything COVID related.
Does the committee have any
Thanks,
objection to any of these three items?
I don't, but I do have a question.
I have a question.
Go ahead,
Go
Tamara.
ahead, Cinda.
Okay, Cinda, it's up to you.
Tamara, you're on the committee. You go ahead.
So at the beginning of the meeting, Justin, well, first of all, Justin, thank you for acquiring all these grants. You have been amazing. Secondly, at the beginning of the meeting, you mentioned that we had about $13,000 left in the CARES grant. Does that include the $2,500 for the software and the Google costs?
Yeah, that would be, so the 13,000 would be after those are purchased.
Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Into the cost, yes.
Cinda, go ahead.
So my question was, if the $2,500 for the software, did we pay $2,500 for that software at the high school, and now we have to pay another $2,500 for Ike and Horace Mann? Is it building specific, or how's that working?
Cinda, I think we paid $2,500 for it to go to the junior high in the last board meeting, not the high school. The high school already had it.
Okay, so is it another 25? Do we not get one license that covers the whole school district, or how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. Aaron, I know you spoke to your music teachers. Is there anything you can elaborate on? If not, we can get the answer tomorrow, but anything you could speak to about that?
Could you just repeat the question one more time to make sure I understand what you're asking?
Are we spending $2,500 for the software for each building? Is it $2,500 for the whole district? What's the amount?
Okay, the $2,500 that is there now would cover Ike and Horace Mann, and it covers the two programs that they would be using to do this online and the additional special.
So it's a building and per student cost is what you're saying, Aaron?
Yeah, it costs $8 or $6 per student for that, and the $2,500 would cover Eisenhower and Horace Mann.
Yeah, just to verify that, Mr. Vukovic, same as the junior high, that cost is based on certain seat licenses per that building. So that would be a separate junior high, and then for the for Horace Mann and that group down there, it is a separate thing with separate seats based on kids. Yep.
Okay.
Yes, and when I did that, whenever my teacher did that number, he did it for the 4 or 5 buildings combined.
Okay, is it a yearly cost?
It is a yearly cost. They have packages that you can get multiple years, but we were just doing it for this year because it was for the COVID related problem.
Okay, thank you.
Can we move this ahead then, Mike?
If the committee feels comfortable, yes. Now again, some of this we'll tackle tomorrow night, but some we may not address till the following Monday. I just want to make sure. Yeah, I just want to make sure the committee's comfortable. We went through a lot. It's 8 o'clock. I just want to make sure everyone's comfortable, or if there's anything we can clarify. I know Jared has some work to do. He's going to talk to Madam Vice President, get you some real cost out, and you know, maybe include how we're using that CARES funding so everyone knows we're trying to reduce that hit to the general budget as much as we can.
Yes. Now, I'd like to point out that there's a certain danger in the choral situation, and having this software can perhaps alleviate some of those problems, and we wouldn't have to cancel choirs. So I'm certainly in favor of trying to push this music down into the 4 or 5 level if we can possibly do it. Okay.
That's all I have, sir. If there's anything from the committee for the rest of the team, We're here at your convenience, sir.
You're kidding. I'd like to thank everybody. We had over 110 people on this meeting. Again, it's almost as if we're getting more community involvement by going by doing this virtually. So I'd like to thank everybody that attended. I can't tell you how impressed I am with the administration and the faculty and the whole group of us on the work that's been done. We've been doing heavy lifting for 3 months now, and about the time we think we're done, we got to do it again. But you guys have been phenomenal. So keep it up. Let's get these schools open. Let's get these kids back in some seats. Let's teach somebody to read this week. I'm done, Mike.
Okay, Chauncey or Josh, if you're on, if you need me, I'm here. If not, we'll see everyone tomorrow night.
Okay.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you, Mike.